Yes, starting with Mr. Weeks,
Yes.
Ms. Pitcher,
Yes.
and Chair Angelini.
Yes. All right. First order of business is the authorization of the execution of the fiscal year 26 operating cooperation agreement with the city of Worcester in the amount of $678,305. Mr. Dunn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is July, so we have entered into the new fiscal year, and the FY26 budget has been approved by the City Council. So I've given an excerpt here from that operating budget that went through the City Council process. The total anticipated expenditures for the WRA Union Station this year is about $2.4 million. That is offset by tenant revenue of about $684,000, and then the FTA preventative maintenance funds that we're eligible to charge back to them for certain eligible operating costs of about a little over $1 million. So that leaves us with this budget appropriation from the city's tax levy of $678,305, and this will enable us to execute that cooperation agreement between the WRA and the city of Worcester for those funds for FY26.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from members of the authority? Is there a motion for approval of the approving the execution of this agreement?
Motion to approve.
Mr.
Second.
Weeks, all right. Any discussion? Let's have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Weeks,
Yes.
Ms. Pitcher,
Yes.
and Chair Angelini.
Yes, thank you. The second item is similar. It's the fiscal year 2026 capital cooperation agreement with the city of Worcester. Would you explain this, Mr. Dunn?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the capital budget is submitted separately to the City Council, which has also been approved. And the way we typically approach this for the WRA and Union Station is the 20% match requirement. So as we use the FTA funds for capital improvements at the building, there is that local 20% match requirement. And so the new authorization for FY26 would be this amount of $1,025,962. And this would be a separate agreement to keep the operating funds and capital funds separate. So this will enable us similarly to execute that with the city of Worcester.
Are there any questions or comments from members of the authority? Is there a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
In the absence of further discussion, let's proceed to a roll call vote.
Mr. Weeks,
Yes.
Ms. Pitcher,
Yes.
and Chair Angelini.
Yes, yes. All right. The next item is the execution of a contract with Land Telecommunications. Mr. Dunn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The board might recall when we had the presentation from Public Facilities back in December, they had gone over some of the highest priority capital improvements for the property and in relation to the different phasing of FTA grants. The oldest one, which we refer to as phase one from FTA, which was described, we're trying to wrap that up, close that out because it's the oldest grant with FTA. The remaining capital project on that was the camera installation project to improve that with security at the building. And so the bid was put out. We had two bidders, Land Telecommunications and Austro Electric. Gave in the packet here a copy of the pricing proposal from Land Telecommunications, which is the lowest qualified price on that. And so that totals $127,660.50. And that is a successful bidding exercise because the dollars we have allocated for that from the FTA grant and budgeting process is $216,112. So we came in, in line with a little bit of cushion as well.
Good. Are there any questions or comments?
When is this work going to be completed?
So we would proceed if this vote is approved. We would proceed with the execution of the contract, which has already been drafted. I do think the vendor is actually a little anxious because they submitted this. I think the bid came in a couple months ago. And so with everything being so in flux with pricing and increases in inflation, I think they want to make sure that they can proceed as soon as possible so that they have those pricing lined up with the different materials that are involved. So I don't know, Mr. McDermott, do you know what the duration is? I think it's a fairly simple job. I don't know if there's lead time on ordering the materials and whatnot, but I forget. I don't know if we had specified a contract duration in the bid or if they submitted an estimate of how long it would take them to do it. Do you know?
Yeah, the duration, actually, I don't have it in front of me, but it was no longer than 2 months. It was fairly simple job.
Thank you.
And the lead time wasn't too long either on the materials.
Good. All right. Is there a motion to approve item number 3?
So moved.
Motion to approve. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Okay,
You take it, Walter.
Seconded by Mr. Weeks. Thank you, Sherry. Let's proceed to a roll call vote.
Mr. Weeks,
Yes.
Ms. Pitcher,
Yes.
and Chair Angelini.
Yes. All right. So the next item involves the Denholmes building, and Peter, would you like to bring the authority up to date with regarding your discussion since our last meeting on the subject?
Sure. And I can jump to the conclusion on this too. I will be recommending holding the authorization to actually execute this agreement to the next meeting because we're still discussing. I think they're going through internal kind of approvals on it, but I think it's helpful to talk about the terms of considering that amendment and what that would look like in relation to their update that they provided to us at the last meeting. So if you remember the kind of essence of their update to us with the due diligence, obviously the demolition and abatement is significantly more costly than originally anticipated. And as they go through the financing strategies that they had walked us through and the gap that exists and trying to match up various sources of financing to bridge that gap, they had talked about one needing a more time. So they had requested a 12-month extension on the various dates and milestones in the agreement. And then also a project modification. The original proposal that is articulated in the land disposition agreement calls for not less than 230 units of housing, including first floor commercial, and then a financial commitment based on the budget for that project at not less than 100 million. So based on their update to us and looking at more of a manageable mid-rise type construction, bringing it closer to, I think their goal is 190 units there is what they had described. And the estimate right now on total development cost is 75 million. I think that what I appreciate about what they had described and what I've been emphasizing to them as they've gone through this exercise is that for us, the design was really important. So while this would be a fewer stories, the original one was about 10 stories, and this would come down to 7 stories along the Main Street elevation. Knowing that would be a more economical approach for us, I didn't want that to have any sacrifice in terms of the design approach. So being more kind of masonry and design that's in keeping with what we see along the Main Street corridor and the historic kind of building materials that you see along that corridor as well. So I do appreciate that is their intent is to continue with that design approach. Which is important. And then the other thing that we had talked about is that this extension could have real implications for us because they were originally scheduled to take title to this in March of 2026. So what I've said to them is that I would be comfortable recommending to the board an approval of that extension, provided that they take responsibility for the carrying costs on the property at that date of March of 2026, because that's when we anticipated our carrying costs would end. So they appreciate that. And that's, I think, one of the things that they're working through internally to get back to us and let us know if that works for them as well. And then I know that we had also talked about the deposit. So right now, with why they had submitted to us this extension request and the due diligence report that was called for in the LDA that was due in March, but they submitted to us in March, and we've been kind of going back and forth and reviewing that since that time frame is the March of 2025. A few months ago is when their due diligence period would have ended, and then the deposit would have gone hard, so that if they walk away from the project effectively now, anytime after March, that they would lose their deposit. So the effect of this, extension of 12 months would kick out that due diligence to March of 2026. And so I think that's the other thing that would be good to discuss is, any kind of considerations we might want to have on when and how that deposit goes hard and what there is in terms of that kind of a penalty of losing that deposit for walking away. I think that potentially that March of 2026 is reasonable as well. But obviously, if they were to get back to us anytime between now and March of 2026 and say, this isn't going to work for us, we're going to have to walk away from the project, they would be entitled to their deposit being returned. So I think that's the other kind of key thing for us to maybe consider as we proceed with the negotiation of these terms of that amendment and extension.
You remind us of the amount of the deposit, Peter.
I believe it was 10%. I think it's 150,000 because the cash due at closing would be, or maybe it's more than that. Cash due at closing would be 500,000 because the minimum bid was 3 million, and then they're taking on the responsibility for abatement and demo, and we had offered the $2.5 million credit for that. So the cash due at closing would be 500,000. Let me just look up what that is that we have, unless Mr. Ormsby knows off the top of his head.
Is there a deposit which has been made? Or
Yes, we're holding I think it's technically a bid bond that we're holding right now with the purchase.
Peter, this is
Yeah.
Craig, through the chair. It is 5%, and it was part of the, as Mr. Dunn said, part of the RFP process, 5% on the 3 million value. So 150,000, as Mr. Dunn had said, was the bid bond.
So the bid deposit is $150,000. We're holding that. Technically speaking, that deposit, as things now stand, that deposit is not returnable. They're asking for an extension. If we grant the extension and don't make an alternative arrangement regarding the deposit, extension period, they could withdraw and also be entitled to recover the deposit, $50,000. Did I say it correctly?
Well, I think in that, see if Ms. Kalkunis has a different take on this, but because their due diligence report was submitted to us in March with that extension request, since we have been, while it is obviously beyond March at this point, because we've been evaluating that request since March, I think if we were to say we're not interested in doing an extension, we're going to terminate and maybe put this out to bid again, I think they would be entitled to that deposit being returned because they had made that request of us before that deadline.
Through the chair, that's correct. So, because they submitted their request before the term ended, they would be entitled to that deposit.
But if we decline the request, is to say, so your advice is that if we decline the request, they'd be entitled to the deposit.
Yep.
Correct.
It's only $150,000.
Yep.
So Peter, there are two issues on the table then, right? For us to first, or several. One is we need to decide whether to grant the request for an extension, and if so, for how long. Second, we need to consider whether, as a condition of granting that extension, we should ask them to take title to the property and thereby relieve us of the ongoing costs of waiting their development. And third, we are considering requesting that if they withdraw at some point in time during the extended period, whether they would be entitled to the 10% deposit of $150,000. Those are the items on the table, right?
Yep.
Okay, well, we'll see what they say. I mean, my encouragement is that we tell them that we'd like to get this completed during our August meeting. Time is an enemy, not an ally. This is a signature property. Many of you on this call look across at this property every day from your offices. My sense is that asking them to take title and asking them to go hard on their deposit in return for an extension of time is not terribly aggressive from our point of view. So let's see what they say.
Mhm. And just
But
one point of clarification, because with the extension, it would be that they would take title, that they would be responsible to take title in March of 27, but at March of 26 is when they would take responsibility for the carrying costs. So we would still actually have title for that year between March of 26 and March of 27, but we would be absolved of our ongoing carrying costs because they would take responsibility for the carrying costs. So we would like assign over certain service agreements to them in terms of security and utilities and things like that. And we could work through the logistics of that, whether we actually, are still getting the bills to the WRA and charging them back for it to reimburse us for that, or whether they actually, put the utility bills in their name. I think just thinking through like National Grid, they might not want to put the utility bill into somebody else's name that doesn't have title, but the idea being that they would take responsibility for our carrying costs.
right, as if they own the property.
Right, right.
We can work out.
Right.
We have very, we'll have no trouble
Right.
articulating that.
Can you remind us what those carrying costs are, Peter?
Yeah, right now we're averaging about 15,000 a month or so. A lot of it has to do with utilities and security. So we have some limited heat during the winter months to make sure that pipes don't freeze and that the sprinkler system and fire prevention stays active. We have a fire alarm panel. We have lighting. There's pretty limited lighting at this point, but we do have like the bill that we get from National Grid for electricity. We have several security cameras. So there's a vendor that we have with security cameras. So it's pretty modest at this point. But that's what it totals up through all those different vendors and costs. It's about $15,000 a month that we're averaging right now.
So right now they're estimating this project to be 75 million, 490 units.
Yes, yes.
And so that's about, I did the math, it's about 400,000 a unit. Are we finding that to be kind of the industry standard right now?
It's average, it's hard, every project has its own unique kind of
Yeah.
circumstances. Some of the other ones that we've seen, we have two ongoing in the downtown, including them. They're under construction with 204 Main Street, the former Olympic Trophy building. And then we have Synergy Investments in the Planning Office of Urban Affairs doing the affordable condos at 22 Elm Street. And when you're dealing with like adaptive reuse of historic buildings, you tend to see some cost per units that are in excess of that because you're dealing with some of those historic kind of features. And in many cases, the requirements of National Park Service for the historic tax credit eligibility. So that kind of drives the cost up a little bit. So those are closer to like $600,000 a unit, I think. But on new construction, 400,000 is, I would say right now, kind of the average.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it should not be forgotten that they were not Mankini, which has a good history of engaging with this community, was not the only bidder for this property.
Right.
And that we asked someone else to step aside in their favor for a very different project than they're now proposing, for fewer units than they are now proposing, and sooner than they are now proposing. So let's see where it goes, but I think we can all agree that this is something that has to be decided within the next month. And if you, I hope you'll communicate that to them, Mr. Dunn.
I agree.
Okay. All right. So there's no action to be taken regarding this, but if there are further questions from the authority, let's have them.
I do have one question. Is it
Sure.
safe to assume, Peter and members of the board, Chair, are we okay with the reduction of the units? Is that going to benefit them, or is it going to hurt us as we consider moving forward?
Yeah, it's a good question.
So-
My opinion on it is that I think it's good for both of us collectively in terms of getting the project to a feasible level. So they had walked through the different, pro forma analyses that they had done at the last meeting of like if they were to continue to proceed with the proposal as initially submitted, it creates a pretty sizable gap that I think is unrealistic to close with the available sources of subsidy from various levels of government, whether that's local or state or federal. So I do think based on the latest pro forma on this kind of 190 unit concept, mid-rise concept, it brings the gap into a more manageable place to close the gap. So I think that's collectively in our both interests. In terms of in the future, to your point, certainly having 40 or so fewer units would be the kind of proportionally less taxes, as the improvements get done, and what the tax revenue would be to the city as a result of those improvements, it would be less because you have fewer units on the site. But I think at the end of the day, if we are just looking at a proposal that's infeasible, then it won't have any tax revenue increase to the city. So, but that would be like the implication of the fewer units, then fewer housing opportunities, obviously, for Worcester community as a result. But I think one of the reasons why they were also targeting that 190 unit, knowing that we did have another bidder, the other proposal that we had received that was not awarded was at about 190 units. So I think that's kind of also where that comes from and how they were trying to target that unit count based on the design and mid-level construction, so that they were at least equal to what the other option was for us, which there were other factors at play as well. I think we didn't appreciate the design approach on the other one being just a typical wood frame construction and how that would feel kind of out of place along Main Street as well. So there's other aspects to it other than just unit count, but I think that's where that goal of targeting 190 units does come from.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to status reports. Mr. Dunn.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Several status updates for you. I'll start with Union Station, and actually more primarily with the MBTA working group. So there was a meeting earlier this week, a pretty important meeting with they call it, the Department of Transportation calls it the Alston I-90 Multimodal Task Force, where they've been reviewing design, the evolution of design for the West Station project in Alston. So that is on the Worcester Framingham line. So it's very important to us. It's been one of the things that our local task force has been paying attention to as it relates to the future potential for us and the connectivity to Boston. One of the key updates that happened at that meeting was the announcement last week that they are losing, for the time being, $327 million from the federal government. With everything happening at the federal level, they had previously received a commitment of $327 million, which was very important for the project to proceed. So what they're doing now is trying to figure out, where they go from here, because that obviously affects their ability to proceed as intended with that project. And so the DOT staff had said that in the immediate term, they're going to be bringing on outside engineering services to figure out, are there ways to phase it? Are there ways to kind of scale the project? I think they shied away from using the term value engineering, because value engineering sometimes has negative connotation. So they kind of are trying to keep true to the overall goals for the project, but trying to figure out, are there things that they could do to keep the momentum going, keep progress going, but also recognizing that they'll have to scale back the budget based on available resources for now. So a couple of things that they had talked about related to that, and the term that they emphasized was a scaling plan or phasing plan, so that as maybe conditions change with federal funding, that they could rapidly keep things going if those resources become available again. And they talked about some early action items that are more localized, I would say, in the Alston area versus the benefits that we would receive. So that remains to be seen on kind of where that will go, but we'll pay close attention to it. The other thing that they had talked about was continuing on, and a lot of the participation emphasized them continuing on with their environmental process of where they had been and where they were at with design. They were still needing to wrap up an environmental impact statement, which is required under, I think, probably both state and federal regulation based on the scope of the project and the funding sources of the project. So there is a submittal deadline that they were reaching for the federal funds in September of this year for the environmental next phase of like their environmental progress. So everybody had said, well, we got to keep that going and make sure that that gets kind of accomplished so that everything is ready to keep moving forward and proceeding. I had submitted some commentary on behalf of our local task force on a couple of topics. One, some concern about if they're going to phase things or scale things or value engineer things and reduce scope, that it does not come at the expense of the benefits that are intended for the Worcester Framingham line and commuters from Worcester. In particular, the Research Bureau and the task force had talked about some of the design elements of having this separate dedicated track as our commuters kind of go through this West Station in Alston, so that we don't get kind of bogged down by that. And so trying to make sure that that doesn't get changed as they go through this process, as well as just generally when we talk about, what this project seeks to accomplish and all the transportation benefits, reminding them that this whole project and the conversation they're having is only made possible because of the CSX relocation from that area to Worcester. In my opinion, I think that a lot of the folks that were participating and where the conversation has been most recently for them has been, kind of localized around the Alston area and Boston. The city of Boston is financially contributing to the project as well. I think it was appropriate and timely for us to remind them of that. And to make sure that they're not thinking about Worcester's interests as a secondary perspective, that it is all of this is only made possible because of what we did for them with CSX coming to Worcester. So that's kind of the key update. We'll continue to keep a close eye on it and probably take more active participation in this task force and with the DOT. But I think we've kind of put our stake in the ground to say that we will be paying attention to that and that our interests in all of this are critical. So,
yeah, let me just add to that what Mr. Dunn said is absolutely correct, and thank you for attending the session. Not only did the relocation of CSX to Worcester allow this property to be freed up for development, but Worcester was explicitly promised increased commuter rail service in consideration of CSX's transfer of its yard to Worcester. And some of us went through the language of the documents that were exchanged at the time, and it's crystal clear that we gave up something in return for being promised something we would receive. And we will need to be appropriately aggressive about insisting that this is not simply a project in Alston to benefit the city of Boston. It's a project in Alston to facilitate what we were promised. And so intention is that we be as aggressive about that, reasonably aggressive about that, because all we're looking for is what we're entitled to.
Yes.
We'll be talking more about this. We may want to involve our delegation. We may want to get some publicity about this, but something that this authority will be spending more time on.
Yeah, so that's where we're at on that. I know we already talked about Union Station a little bit, the camera installation, so I was going to move on to the RMV site unless there's kind of any questions or updates kind of that you're curious about related to Union Station or MBTA before I move on.
No, please do.
So on the, we had talked a little bit about the RMV site at the last meeting, and that continues to progress. So the one at 611 Main Street, as you know, the former location before they moved over to the Route 20 area. So DOT is handling that directly. It's not going through DCAM. So DCAM does a lot of real estate for the state. It's the Division of Capital Asset Management and Maintenance, but this is being handled directly by Department of Transportation, their Office of Real Estate and Asset Development. So we have their, I would say, willingness to transfer title to that property to the Worcester Redevelopment Authority so that we can make sure that the future procurement of that, the sale of that site, and the redevelopment of that site is aligned with what we're trying to accomplish in the downtown area and the urban revitalization plan. So that's really great. Just to the initial framework that I think this is where this will head is that they intended, as they would otherwise put the property back out to bid themselves, a minimum bid price of 1.5 million. So in transferring title to us, they would ask us to do that same kind of minimum bid price of 1.5 million, and that they would get those sale proceeds, but that anything in excess of those sale proceeds, we would share in that 50-50. The thing that we are working on now, our special projects team, is that we have some steps as a redevelopment authority under the law before we take acquisition to a property or vote on acquisition of a property. It is right outside of our urban revitalization plan boundary, so it's not technically within the boundary right now, but it's very much adjacent to it. So a lot of the goals and objectives and the vision we have are all relevant. But one of the our recommendation moving forward on the procedure that we could follow is what's called a demonstration project. Some of that has to do with the urgency associated with this, the timeliness of it, because it is important that we move forward expeditiously with it. So the demonstration project approach would enable us to do that. It does require a demonstration project plan, talking about the site, its characteristics, current ownership, what the transaction looks like, what we would be hoping to accomplish with this demonstration between this partnership between the state and Worcester Redevelopment Authority, as well as our vision for the redevelopment, which would be primarily housing development. The state wanted us to do that. Obviously, they have a real focus on addressing the housing crisis and housing production across the Commonwealth. So that would be the primary use. I think it would be nice to have maybe some first floor commercial activation like we do with a lot of projects, but it would be primarily focused on that opportunity for housing production and the redevelopment. So we're working through now, putting together this demonstration project plan that we'll bring to the redevelopment authority, and we'll need to kind of accomplish that step before we can actually proceed with the transaction. But things are moving in the right direction, and I think it's a good outcome for us, because the last time that they did put it out to bid, a few years ago, we didn't really have much influence on that or much say in terms of how to qualify bidders, how to qualify their redevelopment approach. And so I think this is a good thing for us moving forward. So that's kind of where we're at now, and just kind of a preview of some additional steps that we'll be taking over the next couple of months.
Can you lay out the timing for us? I'm sorry, Chair.
No, go ahead, please.
Yeah, the timing's going to be driven.
Yeah.
I think the state would like to move as quickly as we're able to move.
Okay.
The timing for it is really dependent on the preparation of this demonstration project plan. It's fairly involved. It's not anything to the scale of an urban renewal plan at all. But it's probably, my guess is going to be 10 to 15 pages of information, some historical stuff, some, characteristics of the site, some required things that need to be included in something like that. So I would anticipate that would probably be ready for presentation to the board, hopefully at our September meeting. And then, proceeding, my best guess would be that we would hopefully then be able to take title, this fall, maybe October,
Okay.
November. Yeah.
Would it still be used it's been used as a shelter, right, in the winter?
It has been last at least 2, if not 3, I think definitely the last 2 winters as a temporary emergency shelter.
It's been through the state, not the
Yeah,
city, right?
it was under state ownership, so it was under state jurisdiction as it relates to building code and inspections and sign off and all that. There are some implications to that. I'm due to speak with the city manager. I know a lot of our partners and certainly the administration, but also our community partners are starting to think about and have been thinking about this winter, what to anticipate this winter and the needs of our community. But I think there are a number of factors at play that would likely not have this property under consideration again. Under the last couple of years, it was under state jurisdiction, of course, but we did have some, flexibility under the building code for temporary use and occupancy. And so I think that if it was to be considered again, there might be cost implications around, code compliance and renovations necessary, whether it's still eligible for that kind of flexibility under temporary use and occupancy. And then obviously if it was no longer under state ownership as this timeline plays out, and if we're taking title as the redevelopment authority before the winter, I don't think it would be, the right fit for us to be the owner and
Right,
looking at that.
operator.
So we're going to
Yeah.
kind of map out the timeline that we're going to be on for taking title with the timeline of the season as well, and just how we're doing with other solutions and accommodations for the needs that we anticipate in the winter. So it's a good question, and I'll keep the board posted as we move along, as I hear more about that strategy for this winter from the city manager and other partners.
And what's the status of 627 Main right next door?
So that is the former Worcester Market, historical Worcester Market building. They do kind of share, I think, a party wall. So if this building in the future were to be demolished, there'll be some coordination necessary there. But right now that it's privately owned, it's primarily utilized on the first floor. So it's a two-story building. The first floor is an adult daycare center. It seems to be a very successful adult daycare center. And I know that they've been thinking about different options for the second floor as well. But I would anticipate that that ownership and that use would largely continue for the first foreseeable future.
Okay.
Is there anything further on this subject? Did you want to mention anything regarding Madison properties, Mr. Dunn?
Sure. So on Madison properties, there is I had mentioned our interest in getting a written report. And I think, a lot of what I had heard from Madison was, similar, that the written report would be a lot of what I've been conveying verbally as well. And we have definitely a lot of moving pieces right now. So I think nailing them down on a written report and what's in there, and some of it's like sensitive because of ongoing negotiations and discussions. So I think we'll maybe revive the written report shortly, but I can tell you that Madison has identified the hotel partner, hotel operator. They've been in contact with us about, the land disposition agreement and the role that the city of Worcester had. As you remember, the city of Worcester had a TIP framework for that property. So they're doing their due diligence, understanding that better, and talking with us about that and what steps might need to be taken related to that. But there has been I would say, some substantive momentum on that, and a good partner that's been identified that has a depth of experience with other hotels and other real estate development in the state. So that is, I think, a positive. I think, we're, making sure that we're approaching that with our interest first and foremost. We want to get the project done. We understand, obviously, a lot of the different economic conditions, market conditions, and all of that. So we're just kind of working through some of those nuances with them about the role that we will inevitably have, mostly on the city of Worcester side versus the redevelopment authority side, because it really relates to the TIF framework versus like the urban renewal plan implications or the land disposition agreement implications. So I think that is some progress. And then they also have a purchase and sale agreement on the second residential site. So we have also been in contact with the buyer of the second residential site, and they're going through due diligence right now related to permitting and zoning and construction costs and all of that, as well as, the tax benefit implications to that as well. So one of the things that, just as a reminder, is kind of like a logistical thing, is that when we did this land disposition agreement with Madison and the relationship with the city of Worcester, there was a value for value exchange. As you all know, we received some land from Madison as the redevelopment authority to build the ballpark, to build the parking garage. In exchange for that, he received the lease agreement and the control of the parking garage, but also tax benefits on each of his development program elements. That would be included, obviously, with the second residential hotel too. So working through that, and just from a timing perspective, while those like resolutions and the commitment on the tax benefits for each of these development program elements have been, I would say, memorialized in terms of what they look like, we have not executed all of the contracts. So whether it's the TIF agreements or the tie agreements on the residential, we intentionally did not execute those agreements yet, because you really need to have an understanding of, the project structure, the project timeline, the estimated occupancy. So it's not that we were like dragging our feet or not doing it. It's like when you actually get to the contract stage for the TIF agreements or tie agreements, you just need to have the project timelines and all of that a little bit more clear on some of those elements. So that's why they haven't been executed. But obviously these partners, whether it's the hotel group or the buyer now of the second residential site, they're in their due diligence working with us of like what steps need to be taken. Do we go back to city council? Do we have to have any kind of state approval? And so we're, giving them guidance on all of that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and the other
Any
thing I forgot to
questions?
mention is
No.
I do have the appraisal underway. So for the left field building, at the last meeting, I had mentioned that we were working through identifying an appraiser to get that accomplished. And so that has been ordered. We have a purchase order open on that. It's Howard Dono and Associates out of West Boylston that's going to be doing that for us. I'll have to see. It could be right around the time of our next meeting. But certainly if I have it in hand by the next meeting, I'll certainly share that appraisal report with the board for the left field building.
Thank you. All right.
Excellent.
Can they sell that building? They can sell it, right?
Yep. There would need to be approvals.
Because I
from
think they
us,
have it on the market. I mean, I think they're trying to sell it.
Yeah. Yeah, they had actually, and that was one thing that we had emphasized to them, if you remember, because they had expressed to us through a series of communications that they were open to selling it because their timeline for execution was not in the near future. So we had said, well, are you willing to sell it? They said yes, and we had pushed them to say, well, that needs to be communicated to the market. You need to list it. You need
Right.
to have a sign. So you
Right.
might have seen recently there's a sign. I think it's Keller and Sadowski. So they've moved on that. But one thing that is particularly relevant and related to what we had talked about previously with the fact that the left field building is one of the pieces of land that the WRA previously owned. So we have a little bit more involvement, a little bit more control, and our land disposition agreement is a little bit more specific about the left field building and the obligations than some of the other projects that were never on WRA property. And so if there was a sale, I believe I'm just remembering, trying to remember the section of the LDA that we have the ability to review the credit worthiness of that buyer, what they're doing. So they couldn't just like sell it and like not tell us or not get our approval or consent on that. Yeah.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
Oh, and then I have another one
So
that's
are there
not,
any
I guess it's kind of
yeah,
related
go ahead.
it's technically not the downtown urban revitalization plan. It's one of our older, still active for the time being, revitalization renewal plans is the Union Station area. So this relates to our other hotel project that we've been working on at Washington Square. Want to give the board an update on that. If you remember, their latest agreement with them calls for them to take ownership in September. I think that's still a reasonable expectation. But as I mentioned to the board before, we've been working through some of the comments from the title company, because obviously they'll need title insurance on title to this property. And I think we've made a lot of progress, but there's one thing that has come up that's been a little challenging that I want to give the boards a heads up on is with respect to the railroad. So there's a piece, let me just actually share my screen because I think it'll be helpful for you to visualize this. Okay, so hopefully you can see this plan of land on my screen. It gives you a sense, to the right side is Washington Square Rotary, to the left side is there's
Okay, you all,
I can see it.
you all have
you
it?
can.
Yeah, nothing's up yet.
Oh, you can't.
Can't. Now we can see it.
Yeah.
Now we
Oh,
got
you
it.
can now.
Oh, we
Okay, I
can.
think that's just
Oh, we have
a
it,
little-
yeah.
So there were a series of technically, I guess it would be 4 parcels here that we're conveying. And one of them is the one that's formerly known as like the vacuum cleaner building parcel. That's right adjacent to the railroad bridge here. In our chain of title, as we acquired this property, it was not through an eminent domain. It actually came to us through the City Square transaction. So in our chain of title, there's an obligation that the WRA has currently to maintain and repair this wall. So like the viaduct kind of wall here where the railroad is, it's been largely improved and repaired through, if you remember a couple of years ago when we demolished the vacuum cleaner building, we did a lot of improvements there. So it's in good condition, which is good. But the buyer and of course their title company is hesitant and about the risk of them inheriting that obligation. And so we had been working through what it would be a maintenance and easement agreement where when we transfer title to this parcel to them, we would hold back those obligations and then have a maintenance and easement agreement on the books. And the title company said, that's fine, but we want to see railroad sign off on that. And the railroad has been very slow to respond on that. And also it's a little complicated because when you go back into how far back this obligation when it first was introduced, there was other railroad companies at the time. So even now, you need to then this railroad company would have to confirm that they have all the rights of those previous railroads and all that. So it's been fairly complicated. And so we think that one solution, especially because time is of the essence here, would be to carve out this parcel, this D-shaped parcel highlighted in red, and have the redevelopment authority keep title to that entire parcel and do a ground lease with the hotel. So on their conceptual plan, they were going to use this area just for parking anyways. So it's not like they'd be building a building on our land. And we feel like that is, a solution that gets us through this, satisfies the title company, and allows them to proceed with the project as planned essentially. And so I think if we do get responsiveness from the railroad moving forward, I think we can come back to this and see if we, terminate that ground lease and then end up conveying it to them. But I think now, because again, it's been a long time, they've been unresponsive and time is of the essence. I think this ground lease scenario could be a good solution. So we're working through the details of that, and then I would hopefully have at the next meeting maybe a transaction for the board consideration around what parcels they would actually take title to versus what parcel we would maintain title and do a ground lease on. So that's kind of a preview of where I think we're headed on this. So no action obviously necessary right now, but wanted to at least share kind of where we were at with that and the direction we might be heading on that.
Very good. Thank you, Peter.
Yep.
All right. I think that completes the status reports. Am I correct?
Yes.
You all have as part of your package, the financial update reports. Are there any questions or comments regarding those? In the absence of that, I think we've completed our agenda. Is there any other business that any member would like to bring to discussion? In the absence of that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, Ms. Sherry, you there? Spitzer, would you second that?
Yes, second.
Thank you. All right. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Weeks,
Yes.
Ms. Pitcher,
Yes.
and Chair Angelini.
And yes, we are adjourned, and thank you all very much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Me too.
Thank you.